shall we begin?
Let the games begin.
All right.
A new age has begun. An age of freedom.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
Get to the chopper!
This is going to be quite the ride.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Movie Pit Podcast. I am your host, Christian Renteria, and this is the podcast where we usually talk about the big movie news items of the week, along with the movie trailers and the movies that are out in theaters and streaming for your viewing pleasures this weekend. However, this week's podcast is a little different, obviously, as you can see from the title, because this podcast is a recap of 2021, at least the movies that came out in 2021, because I'm not talking about my life. We'll be talking about my favorite movies of the year, my disappointments / least liked movies of the year, my surprises of the year, my frustrating movies of the year, and along with some other things as well. This year, like last year, I didn't reach my average movie watching count because, COVID. Also, if you follow the page, my Twitter page, for the podcast, you know that for Christmas, I got COVID. Technically before Christmas. So I had COVID on Christmas, but I didn't get it on Christmas. Anyway, let's talk about some movies. For clarity's sake, I did see and watch 80 new movies this year. I won't be talking about all of them, obviously, because we'll be here forever. But before we get to the list, I do want to point out movies that I didn't get a chance to watch that I really wanted to watch that probably would have made the list at one of these lists by the end of the year. So if you're wondering, hey, where's this movie? Why aren't you talking about it? It's probably because I didn't get a chance to watch it. So those movies, I have a lot of these movies. So I have Malcolm and Marie, News of the World, Cherry, Cruella, Spyro, Pig, Spiral. I don't know why I sound like I said Spiral. Spiral, the Saw movie. Pig at the Night House, No Sudden Move, Riders of Justice, Zola, Demonic, The Last Duel, The Harder They Fall, Titan, The Power of the Dog, Nightmare Alley, which coincidentally that's the day that I tested positive for COVID, that I was going to go to the movie later, or I was going to go to the movie later that day, and then in the morning I went to go get tested because we got a call that I might have been in contact with someone that was positive, so I went, and it was the case. So didn't get to see Nightmare Alley. I also didn't get to see Kingsman, or The King's Man. That was we had rented out a theater for Christmas, and obviously because I had COVID, I couldn't go. So yeah, so that's all on the list. Unfortunately, these are movies that just missed the list. These are movies that I did watch that I just couldn't really find a place for them, and really thinking about it, I probably wouldn't want to put them on the list anyway. They're just they're good. They're just movies that just didn't quite make any of the lists. Antlers, Werewolves Within, Raging Fire, Luca, and Army of the Dead. I think I didn't put Raya and the Last Dragon. That was also another notable movie that didn't quite make the lists. All right, so let's just get to the first big group of movies, because I feel like this is going to be a long podcast. I might have to record this in 2 parts, but here we go. So the first big group we're going to talk about is what I like to call the undecided movies of the year. I created this category, this list, a couple years ago for myself, because these are movies that I want on a list, that I definitely want on a list, but for whatever reason, I don't know where to put them. So this is where that kind of comes in. By the way, every movie on the list is in alphabetical order. So don't think because a movie's first or last in the order that I talk about them in that's the order they're in. That's just how it works alphabetically. Just for clarity's sake, and just to keep things fair, I did used to put movies like in order, but I stopped doing that because it became really hard. All right, so the first undecided movie of the year that we're going to talk about is A Quiet Place Part 2. I, like many, was blown away by A Quiet Place. It was a full experience that I don't think many believed was possible, and quite frankly would never be replicated. That is until, of course, John Krasinski, who directed the first movie, also starred in it. He also has a small role here, or makes a small appearance at the beginning of this one, because it's a flashback sequence. before the events of the first movie, he decided to make a sequel. So unfortunately, A Quiet Place Part 2 is one of the many movies that, of course, was delayed due to the pandemic. I don't think it's hard to say, rather, that the results of watching this movie in a theater compared to Paramount Plus or video on demand, which is how I watched it, was, changed your experience of the movie. Because A Quiet Place definitely probably benefited from watching it in a big screen and a theater with a bunch of other people who were trying to be quiet, because they were afraid to make a sound like the characters in the movie. I think it was also, the same effect for A Quiet Place Part 2. So, I was one of the people that waited until it dropped on Paramount Plus. And let me tell you, it was a very different experience watching it at home in the summer with the blinds covered up and the air conditioner on at full blast because it was hot as hell outside, and you having to turn up the sound system because you needed to drown out the air conditioner. And even I knew it was too loud at some point where it was too disruptive. So the experience aspect kind of ruined from watching this movie. It also doesn't help that some of the characters, especially in the beginning of the movie, whisper a lot. So, movie-wise, storyline-wise, the sequel does try to expand the world a little bit. It picks up where the first movie left off. The Abbott family leave their home and run into Cillian Murphy's character, who, in the flashback sequence I mentioned earlier, they interact with a little bit. And, of course, they're trying to survive the monsters and the world that they are now living in. The movie does shift its focus more on Millicent Simmons' character, Reagan, who goes off to find a source of an odd broadcast playing on the radio. Simmons was pretty much a breakout in the first movie, so it was really smart for them to make her the focus of the movie, and then pairing her with Murphy's character, who is pretty much always good in anything he does, and made for a great kind of odd pairing character-wise on this kind of pseudo Trek movie, again, with monsters and other dangers of the world that they live in. At the end of the day, though, it was fun. It was fun being back with these characters and seeing where they went after dealing with the first movie. I heard someone describe, I forgot who it was, but I heard someone describe the sequel as a DLC, which if you play video games, that's downloadable content. And I feel like at the time when I heard it, it was a little harsh, but I kind of, looking back at it as I was putting this list together, excuse me, it's hard not to disagree with that, which is, I think, why it kind of ends up right here on this particular group of the lists. So the next movie on the undecided movies of the year, Candyman. If you want to talk about there was a lot of decisive films this year, especially if you venture into film Twitter. This one was one of them. This was a very divisive film. Of course, directed by Nia DaCosta. Jordan Peele produced the movie. It's a spiritual sequel to the first movie, the old movie. I didn't get a chance to watch it in theaters, so I missed the opportunity to kind of hear and experience what an audience watching this would be like. I watched it at home afterwards, and instead, like I mentioned, I just watched it at home, and I was just hoping that the movie wouldn't let me down, considering, at that point, I hadn't seen too much of the discourse and reaction online, but I had seen enough of it where if I kept, going down that rabbit hole, it definitely would have affected my experience watching it. So here's the thing. Honestly, even to this day, and, going back and seeing some of the discourse of it and seeing, the movie pop up on some people's end of the year lists, I don't really have still a full opinion on Candyman. On one hand, I see the approach they were trying to make with race and culture and everything else the themes of the movie that they were trying to do. But on the other hand, you also have to tell this, and try to make a horror thriller movie based on a character that still scares the crap out of people to this day. And as a horror thriller with some body horror in there as well, Candyman is so effective. The kills are pretty good, but there's one particular out of place, why is a scene in there, bathroom scene with that's in the trailer, and it involves zero characters that have any connection to the main story or characters besides the fact that we see one of the girls in that scene earlier in the movie. But other than that, nothing. And it's pretty tame because all the action happens off camera. It happens like in a reflection, and it's I don't know. Sure, it's the horror that you don't see that scares you the most, but Not here, not with Candyman, because that original Candyman movie was not afraid to show you the kills on screen. This one kind of is a little bit. Yahya Abdul-Mateen the second, his character Anthony McCoy, he's an artist looking for his next big piece of work, finds out about the legend of Candyman and looks for it for inspiration, and it drives the movie most of the way, and you're left wondering, or at least the movie tries to make you left wondering if it really is Candyman, or is he just driven so much to find inspiration that in his big break, that he goes crazy, that he goes mad. And it's a great idea and approach to the story, especially with the modern day, retelling and twist to the Candyman, but execution wise, it lacks a certain punch to really make it worthwhile, especially when we, the audience, kind of already know the answer, or at least we're kind of hoping that the answer actually is Candyman, and that bathroom scene kind of, answers that question. So that's why I'm saying, like, that scene's just so out of place, really, when you think about it. And then there's the twists. Yes, I said twists, because there are 2 twists in this movie. One of them kind of comes out of nowhere, really, and I think if it was given a little bit more time and focus, I think it probably would have worked. I'm talking about the Coleman Domingo's character, because he's connected to that. I don't want to go too much into spoilers, even though this is an end of the year list, and I'm assuming that probably most people have probably seen these movies. But the other one is the main twist, which is connected to Yahya Abdul-Mateen's character and a returning character that I think if you just accept it, then I think it works. But at the same time, I think if they leaned into it a little bit more, instead of just being like, oh, this is it. I think it would have worked. So okay, I guess I gotta talk about it. Yahya Abdul-Mateen's character is the baby from the first movie that Candyman steals, that Virginia Madsen's character tries to save, or does save at the end of the movie. They kind of, they bring Vanessa Williams back, and we're all wondering, like, okay, like, why is she back, and why isn't Virginia Madsen's character back? And Virginia Madsen, apparently she was originally going to be in it, but I guess they couldn't, make it work at the end of the day, so she wasn't there. But they brought Vanessa Williams' character back. She plays the mother of the little kid, and we see that she ends up playing we see that she is the mother of Yahya Abdul-Mateen's character, and it was a nice surprise, like, seeing her pop up, and you're like, then you finally start putting 2 and 2 together. But I kind of wish they maybe had played that a little bit more in the movie. I don't know, maybe it's just me. Anyway, so I wouldn't say I disliked or hated the new version of Candyman like some other people are out there saying. It's definitely not the worst. It's definitely not the worst in the series of Candyman movies. But the discourse around the movie when it came out was rather split down the middle. And for me, again, I still don't know where to put it. I will say, though, that the thing I loved about the new Candyman movie is the shadow puppet show that we see. It's in its entirety during the end credits. We see a little bit, when they're telling the history in the stories of Candyman, but we see the whole thing play out at the end credits. With the very harrowing score that I forgot to put down who did the score, and I apologize for that. But just seeing that whole shadow puppet show at the end, just seeing that by itself is very harrowing, and it's very effective. And I think that was probably really the best thing about Candyman. And I don't know if that's saying something about the movie itself, but that's really good. All right, moving on. Let's just move on, because we got a lot of movies to talk about. The next movie on the Undecided Movies of the Year, F9. Look, I am not ashamed to say that I love the Fast and the Furious franchise. Yeah, some of the movies aren't great, and they haven't hold up, or they don't hold up very well for me personally and overall. But this franchise has been around for a while, and more importantly, since I was a kid, like many other people who probably grew up with this franchise. So seeing and following these original characters, the old characters, and it just keeps the franchise going. And there are millions of people out there who just grew up with these characters and want to watch these characters do their thing. And this franchise also exceeds on the over the top action, sometimes way too over the top action. But that is what fans and the worldwide audience have come to love and expect from these Fast and the Furious movies. All that said, recently the Fast and the Furious franchise is taking a bit of a dip. Let's be honest. Maybe it's franchise fatigue. Maybe it's because they lost Paul Walker. Or maybe the franchise just really is finally running out of ideas and they're just throwing things at the wall and to see what sticks. But The Fate of the Furious, which was of course the last movie, was not very good. And it might get a pass because it was the first full movie that the franchise had to do after the passing of Paul Walker, or the public infighting between Diesel and Dwayne Johnson, which is still going on. Either way, it barely gets past. But here we are, talk about F9, and F9 had some things going for it. It brought back director Justin Lin, who directed the franchise from Tokyo Drift to Fast and the Furious 6. It was bringing back Han, a beloved character who was thought to be dead, and he came back. And it was injecting some more muscular big men into the franchise with
John Cena
as Dom and Mia's forgotten, never before mentioned brother, Jacob. And Jacob with a K, by the way. All that said, the movie still falls flat in most areas. The explanation of Hans's return is very much meh. And even for the franchise with over-the-top action, the how he comes back is way too unbelievable. Yes, I know what I just said. But the payoff with the end credit scene should be interesting to watch, because that's definitely, what I think many fans wanted to see, and we're finally going to get to see that. He then gets bunched in with a new character that's important to the plot, and while it's great that we have another character to add to the family, I don't think we need more characters in this franchise, especially with the franchise supposedly ending. But more importantly is the Jacob story. Yeah, Diesel has once again put himself as the main focus of the franchise and put himself up against another man that we all know would absolutely destroy Vin Diesel in a real fight. But the introduction of his character, a brother of all things who has never again been mentioned this late in the franchise, especially considering we have Dom always saying family, which has now become a meme, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I will say though, bringing back Justin Lin to finish off the franchise, if it is, if that is to be believed, spin-offs of course not included, is a good move. Lin reinvigorated the franchise with Fast 5. He did something completely different, even though some fans didn't like it with Tokyo Drift. He brought back the core cast with Fast and Furious, which was part 4, and he gave us a great action movie overall with Fast 5 and Fast and Furious 6. So I'm definitely going to watch the next 2 movies, because let's face it, at this point, when these movies are gone, we're going to be missing them, even if it's just for the memes and the jokes. But yeah, I'm going to be missing. I will miss these movies, and I will keep watching them. And F9 again, it was meh. It was meh. The next movie, A24. You'll be hearing a lot of A24 on the podcast, and we're going to start off with one of them, Lamb. It's the movie with Noomi Rapace. She plays one half of a married couple on a farm in the middle of nowhere in Iceland, who mysteriously get a lamb that's not just a lamb. No. It is a half lamb, half human baby. And honestly, the less you know about Lamb, the better your experience will be, or at the very least, the better way to make an opinion on your own. Because like A24 tends to do, these types of movies, the ending is a bit bonkers, and it leaves you asking more questions than you already had probably answered and want to have. But overall, Lamb wasn't what I was expecting, especially with how they were promoting it. Because even the promotion for the movie was a little odd. But yeah, so the less you know about Lamb, the better. Which is why I put it here, because I don't know what to say more about that. And the last undecided movie of the year also returns back to A24. It's Saint Maud. This is led and carried by the lead, Moyfred Clark. I think that's how you pronounce her name, her first name anyway, who I had seen but don't remember seeing in Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies. So I consider this my first exposure to her, really, and it is something else. Clark's Maud is a hospice nurse with a troubled past that left her to be outed and deal with the trauma herself. She then gets a new patient, because she's working freelance now, as a new patient with who is a former dancer, played by Jennifer Ahle, and the two start up what looks to be friendship, but then it turns into kind of a more one-sided thing, and Maud thinks that she needs to save Ahle because Maud, as you learn throughout the movie, is very devout in her beliefs and in her faith. And Saint Maud is a great character piece. and definitely something that you can really, and I've seen people dig into and write multiple articles about, whether it be about faith, whether it be about trauma, whether it be about anything, far and in between that you see in the movie. And for me, it really was just seeing how far deep Maud goes and where it was all leading to. And that final act of the movie is something else. And I still think about that final act in the movie, and I still think about those final 10 seconds of the movie. Anyone who has seen Saint Maud and has, told you, hey, check out this movie out, those final 10 seconds, that final minute of the movie, you're going to be talking about her for days. And I still think about this movie every now and then as well, because those final 10 seconds in the movie will stick with you, and it will stick with you for a while. That said, the movie really just kind of felt sometimes like a build-up for that final act and those final 10 seconds, because besides the psychological aspects that the movie that the movie does, you're going along with it, and Saint Maud had me kept me asking, was what I'm trying to say, what the hell is going on, and why is she doing that? And then it led me to think that if I really ended up liking the movie, and it's just that's what Saint Maud did to me when I watched it. And I watched it at night, and I was like, I don't want to close my eyes because I'm going to be thinking about what happened. So yeah, there you go. All right, those are my undecided movies of the year. Let us move on to the next list, which is my frustrating movies of the year. So the first movie on the frustrating movies of the year, Halloween Kills. Oh, Halloween Kills. Look, I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon of hating the movie, because I honestly don't know what to think or feel still about the movie. Is it a step down from Halloween 2018? Yeah, it kind of is. But to say that Halloween Kills is the worst movie of the year, or even the worst Halloween movie ever? Come on. No. One of the problems with Halloween Kills is that while it tries to expand rather, the town of Haddonfield itself to be a real place and not just some random small town that Myers, killed Laurie's friends in, it's a town that has felt the legacy of those killings and is trying to move on, or from the looks of it kind of has, or at least they're really good, rather, of trying to hide it publicly. That is, until Myers comes back into town and takes out years of suppressing urges to kill people and kills a bunch of people in the most brutalest way possible. The thing is that it doesn't really work, because besides the mob of Thomas people, the only residents that we get to know are the legacy characters, or the survivors of Michael Myers, as the movie labels them as. And even then, the legacy characters are mishandled in such a way that you really feel like they just wanted to connect with the John Carpenter classic even more, instead of doing something interesting or fun with those characters. And I don't know if it would be considered a problem but I did see people saying that they also didn't like Jamie Lee Curtis's Laurie was basically sidelined for the whole movie and back in the hospital, like in Halloween 2. And while it does, suck to see Curtis out of action, considering she went toe to toe with Michael Myers in the last movie, she also got stabbed, and the movie takes place pretty much immediately after the first movie. So it would make sense that she, would be out of commission a little bit. Allison, the character of Allison, Laurie's granddaughter, played by Andy Matichik, I forgot how to pronounce her last name. She has that determined drive, that final girl drive, but the writing for her character is kind of lacking. It's really doesn't make nothing that she really does makes her character pop. Judy Greer's character, Karen, which many people have opinions on after this movie came out, especially with where she ends up in the movie, is involved in a storyline that I get why they have it in the movie. It's, the idea that this other patient is running loose in Haddonfield, and, he gets mistaken for Michael Myers, even though every time they try to show Michael Myers on TV, they show us. I'm assuming people probably know what he looks like at that point, and that's another problem. That's kind of like a little, if you really dig deep into Halloween Kills, like, wouldn't people know what he looks like? Wouldn't the townspeople want to know what this guy looked like after all these years? Whatever. But I get why they have that storyline in the movie, but at the end of the day, it kind of just, it ends, and they're like, oh, Anyway, let's move on. So that just, it just feels kind of weird. And again, considering where her character ends up, it's like, why give her, you're just giving her more to do. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, why'd you gotta do that to her character? So I don't know. The humor injected into this movie, the first movie had some humor, of course, you had Danny McBride and coming in, and director David Gordon Green has some experience with comedy as well. So the humor injected into the movie is mainly from the characters of Big John, Little John, which again were characters that some people were questioning why these characters are in the movie, and had people divided. And considering how brutal Michael is to them, and in the movie itself, having them in the movie does give the movie a bit of a break. It gives the audience some room to breathe. And of course, it's a horror movie, and people gotta die, and you just don't get too attached if you end up loving those characters. Just say. Honestly, Halloween Kills, it is kind of a bit of a letdown. From some of the writing to the characters, the story choices, especially the big one revolving around Michael, which, the question of, is he, really magical, or is he, just some, old, he's got old man strength, and, the conflicting comments by David Gordon Green, who came out later, it doesn't really help. The blow isn't really lessened either by the fact that we know this is the second part of a story. And I think, when you realize that and that walking in, you kind of felt like, okay, this is the second part of the story. We're not going to get a full movie. And one of the biggest complaints that I saw people have about Halloween Kills is that the movie feels like it's incomplete. It feels like it's only the first half, or at least, the second half of the story. And they're right. That's what it feels like. So that kind of also sucks a little bit because, we know another Halloween movie is coming with Halloween Ends, which comes out, hopefully later this year, because of COVID and everything. So hopefully they get that done. And we know that the Halloween Ends will take place years after Halloween Kills, presumably, present day with everything. So I don't know. Like, I don't know. I know, there's a lot of negative stuff that's been said. Just to bring some positivity into here, I love the flashback sequence, and I think everyone agrees that the flashback sequences in Halloween Kills are the best part. They got everything down, from the original mask, the costume, the coloring, the on-set, the crew member who looked a lot like why am I blanking on his name? Not his character name. It's Loomis. Donald Pleasance, there you go. The fact that he looked a lot like him, and they just put makeup on him, some makeup on him to make him look even more like Donald Pleasance, so he can look like Dr. Loomis. In that scene, that's incredible. I thought it was CG. I thought it was a deep fake, but apparently it wasn't. So that's really cool. And they released pictures of the guy and putting him through the makeup process. That's really cool. So I don't know. I just, it was frustrating because I was really looking forward to it. I think a lot of people were looking forward to it. I think if you want to put a letdown, if there was one movie that I had to say let me down this year, it probably was Halloween Kills. Moving on to the next frustrating movie on the list, Paranormal Activity: Next of Kin, which you can watch on Paramount Plus. The Paranormal Activity movies have a weird, special place in my heart. The first movie was kind of treated like an event movie. It toured from city to city before it officially got picked up by a studio and played in theaters full time. And that's saying a lot for a movie since it almost didn't get picked up at all. And it weirdly found a home because of Steven Spielberg, which is one of my favorite pieces of Hollywood trivia ever. The best way to describe how the movie was, of course, it was pretty much at that point a modern day take and approach to the Blair Witch Project, the found footage movie aspect of it all. Both extremely low budget with no name actors, with pretty much one or big isolated setting and a few camera tricks and a script that wasn't or a story that wasn't too scripted, that it was pretty much characters improvising and made the characters more believable, and it worked. It really did. I know, we know better now that Paranormal Activity was a movie and, these characters are okay and stuff. But back then, it kind of had that same essence, that same feeling of the Blair Witch Project. So anyway, the franchise opened up. The possibilities were endless. The movie was made on a nothing budget and made millions and millions of dollars. And they made an equally great sequel, a horrifying sequel at that, updating and introducing what would be the lore of the franchise. The third movie went back in time and giving us more scares. And then the series kind of took a dip after that. The fourth movie felt like it was going away from the core characters from the first three movies and then kind of rounding them back in a kind of ham-fisted way. The fifth installment, the marked ones, tried to go another different route, adding a Hispanic twist to it, which was a very nice touch, and it kind of, was the better of this. I thought, it was probably going back to having these movies be really good, and then they made the Ghost Dimension, and yeah. Ghost Dimension is not good, guys. It is not good. So when the news came out that they were making another one, I was hesitant because, again, the Ghost Dimension wasn't very good, but I heard that it was going to be a restart. So I allowed myself to get a little optimistic, and mainly due because who was attached. Christopher Landon was coming back to write the movies. He had been with the series since part 2 all the way to the marked ones. It was directed by William Eubank, who directed the underrated, and I don't think talked about enough, Underwater, the one with Kristen Stewart that came out a couple years ago. And it kept the found footage style because, it's the trademark of the series, so that was fine. Gone were the original characters, and was back to kind of telling an original quote-unquote story with new characters and new dread and whatever, you wanted to put in front of it. However, it still wasn't enough to push the franchise or even the subgenre just a little bit further. And that is the frustrating part. Found footage movies kind of overstayed their welcome a little bit once the first movie, the first Paranormal Activity movie came out and gave, studios the idea to push their horror movies with this style. And what ended up happening was that this subgenre, if that's what you want to call it, became more or less the same of every movie, with a few exceptions and standouts here and there. Next of Kin, unfortunately, falls under the territory of it being more or less the same of what we've seen, from these found footage movies. While the characters don't make dumb decisions, mainly because the story doesn't let them, which is a very nice touch, their actions sometimes border lines on, what are you doing? The story follows Margot, played by Emily Bader in the movie, who, not knowing who her mother was, gets a message from someone claiming to not only know who she is, her mother is, and know who she is. They're apparently related. They're part of a secluded Amish community. But when, of course, she asks questions about who her mother is, she's always met with silence or kind of, diverted somewhere else. And of course, in true Paranormal Activity fashion, the longer they stay on the farm, the more danger they encounter until the final act where everything, goes, batshit crazy. It wasn't like I was expecting Next of Kin to break ground and change, the subgenre of found footage movies, but I was expecting something else. Was expecting a little more, something with a little bit more punch. Again, it's it's a Paranormal Activity movie, but doesn't feel like a Paranormal Activity movie, which is fine, which is great. Again, if you know that this is kind of a restart, but I don't know if they will continue with this or if they're going to go with something else. I don't know. And the ending, kind of already seen that ending multiple times from other found footage movies, so there is that. All right, my next frustrating movie of the year, The Little Things. This was the first big movie of the year. This year, Warner Brothers, of course, also the first big movie that Warner Brothers experimented with, releasing their movies in theaters and HBO Max, which they're no longer doing this year. This was a long in development movie, which I found out later on. It finally came out, and it was okay. The mystery drama thriller with Denzel Washington, Rami Malek, and Jared Leto. Interesting concept. A guy, Jared Leto is, this creep who knows a lot about the case, and he may be the killer, he may not be the killer. And Denzel Washington and Rami Malek play, detectives that are after him. It had a decent trailer. It made us all intrigued. The main problem with the movie, I felt, is that it felt like it belonged in the 90s. And it's probably because writer-director John Lee Hancock had been developing it since 93, and he had been trying to get this movie made all throughout the 90s and didn't work. So it's stuck in the back burner until apparently now, and they made it, which is why the ending of the movie kind of feels a bit like a letdown, mainly because we've seen similar endings already done and better and more deserved than what this movie did. And so The Little Things also kind of dragged a few times. I wouldn't say it was boring, because Washington and Malik and Leto were entertaining enough, but I just it just kind of dragged on a little bit, and this movie should have been a little bit better, but it wasn't. Unfortunately. All right, and the last movie on my frustrating movies of the year, and it's only frustrating because kind of just the overall not mess. I don't know. Messaging is not the right word. I don't know why messaging popped in my head. The overall, kind of knowing where this might not go. It's Zack Snyder's Justice League. I probably should have said what the movie was. Zack Snyder's Justice League. If you were a movie fan that rode the waves of film Twitter, you know there was not a day or an hour or a minute that you were online that you could not see the hashtag release the Snyder Cut. The thing was everywhere. And Snyder didn't help. He poured gasoline onto the fire by releasing images from his cut of the movie online, eventually with a lot, and I mean a lot, of push from fans, from Snyder, from the cast. The Snyder Cut of Justice League was a go. Warner Brothers even gave Snyder more money to finish special effects that he had already started, to redo or to add. And then on top of that, he went and shot brand new scenes for the movie, because why not? And you know, the movie was already pushing 3 hours long, but he was like, you know what? No, I'm going to add more. I'm going to add more to the movie. This was going to be an event. Whether you were on board with it or not, Zack Snyder's Justice League was a must-watch for comic book fans or people who were just genuinely interested in what was going on. I was not the biggest fan of the theater cut, which itself was a re-edit and reshot and overall change to make the movie more accessible, of course, to general audiences, which is why the studio brought in Joss Whedon, who was done with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And of course, the theater cut came under fire when word broke out that all these changes were being made and just how horrible of a person Whedon was. Needless to say, the Snyder Cut was going to be the version that fans now thought of when they heard of Justice League. And the overall opinion was rather positive, especially once you saw just how really different the movie was. Like, holy shit, this movie was completely different from the movie that we got in theaters. The main one, of course, being Ray Fisher's Cyborg. For all intent and purposes, Cyborg was the lead in the movie. He was the heart and soul of Justice League, of Zack Snyder's Justice League. Ezra Miller's The Flash had a really great scene that showcased what he could do, what his character could do. And we finally got to see the popular villain Darkseid on our big screens. But of course, Snyder couldn't help himself, and he added a bunch of slow-mo for no good reason. Sometimes visuals took precedence over story, or pushing the story forward. But overall, yes, the Snyder Cut was a better version of the Justice League that we saw than the theater cut. The movie was done with more heart and more soul, as Snyder's original reason for living, of course. The Justice League at first was the passing of his daughter, and I think a lot of fans knew, and I think I'm pretty sure he also said this, that coming back and finishing this was kind of his way of moving forward and pushing forward with and dealing with that emotion and the passing of his daughter. But even with all that said, none of it matters anyway, because the version of these characters and the story and the world is not what Warner Brothers and DC films are going to move forward with. Plus, even if they decide to bring back Cyborg to the big screen, it's not going to be Ray Fisher playing him because of everything that happened with Ray Fisher and the investigations and the lawsuit and stuff like that. And now there's rumors that the Flash movie is going to, erase the Snyderverse. I don't know if that's true or not. It's just rumors, but whatever. Darkseid. At the very least, this version of him will also not be seen on the big screen, and neither will the Martian Manhunter who appeared in the movie, nor will the idea of the Injustice League, or even the future world where Deathstroke is helping Batman, Cyborg, Mira, and Joker isn't happening. That whole scene, why is it out of focus? I still can't get over why that scene is out of focus for a majority of it. Anyway, the idea of seeing Zack Snyder's Justice League was cool, and the push for it worked. Miraculously, it worked. But the end result is just disheartening, and for naught, since we won't see these versions of the characters again, because they moved away from that version of the DC universe. So yeah, that kind of sucks. So those were the frustrating movies of the year. Let us move on to the dishonorable mentions and my least disappointments of the year. So the first dishonorable mention we're going to talk about is The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. I'm probably one of the handful of people that really enjoyed the first movie. I never knew that I needed Ryan Reynolds and Samuel L. Jackson in a pseudo action buddy comedy where they basically hit and swear at each other for 2 hours.
Motherfucker, I will bust a cap in your ass if you don't give up that wheel.
Have you ever said please?
Please, motherfucker! Why are we always yelling? Get out, fucking!
So I was pretty excited when the sequel was announced and that Salma Hayek's equally foul-mouthed character would be returning. She plays of course, the wife. The trailer delivered on the chaotic fun the first movie had, and seeing Reynolds, Jackson, and Hayek on screen together was definitely going to be a treat. Unfortunately, that wasn't the entire case. The hitman's wife's bodyguard doesn't really have the same charm from the first movie. It wasn't just because there was another character to bounce off of. There was just kind of something missing from the movie that was a little disappointing, and rather than trying to force something or anything, like, I don't know, it just it felt like it was missing something. And thankfully the chemistry between the cast is great for the most part, but I don't know, it just wasn't as good. I don't know. The second dishonorable mention is The Reckoning. When I found out that Neil Marshall, the director of Dog Soldiers, The Descent, and episodes of Game of Thrones, was going back behind the camera with a medieval movie at that, I was pretty excited, because I'm a huge fan of Neil Marshall and the stuff he's done. And then I watched The Reckoning, and the movie isn't horrible or bad per se. It's definitely not what I was expecting from Marshall, considering his past movies. The movie follows Grace, who is played by Charlotte Kirk, who I found out was Marshall's fiance and also co-wrote the movie. She was also if you look her up and you see all these stories about some scandal with her and some executives, that is her. But her character Grace is falsely accused of being a witch after the death of her husband, and she goes on to trial. And one of Marshall's favorites, Sean Petwee, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, co-stars as a priest who specializes in curing, quote unquote, curing women from their hold on the devil, and is assigned to Grace's case, and is paired with a mysterious woman who shares his no mercy like way of completing their missions. Kirk, like I mentioned, who co-wrote the movie, she does a decent job with the material and the role. Obviously she co-wrote it, so she had a pretty good grasp of who the character was. But I don't know, just the movie, it holds your attention for the most part, and then it kind of loses it, and then it gets it back, and it does that too often. And that's kind of why I felt a little off by The Reckoning. Again, the movie isn't horrible. It's not bad, but it just wasn't something that I was expecting from Marshall, considering what he's done beforehand. Hellboy, of course, not included. Although I don't blame Marshall for Hellboy. But moving on. So let's talk about my disappointments / least liked favorite movies of the year. I think both of these are just my least liked favorite movies of the year. I'm not gonna say my worst movies of the year, because I'm pretty sure there's something worse out there that I haven't watched. So these are movies that I just didn't like. Chaos Walking. What a wreck of a movie, Chaos Walking. It has its own share of production problems, with the cast having to go back and reshoot a good chunk of the movie after poor test screenings and studio oversight, which is a shame, considering Tom Holland, Daisy Ridley as your leads. It's directed by Doug Liman, who Mr. and Mrs. Smith and Edge of Tomorrow, the Tom Cruise one with Emily Blunt, the Groundhog Day-esque movie. Admittedly, the source material itself is kind of hard to translate on screen properly without getting too crazy or overboard with it. It's based off a book trilogy by Patrick Ness, and Holland plays a character called Todd Hewitt, who lives on a planet where every woman has died and every man alive has the noise, which is a mysterious disease that causes every thought in your head to appear. So basically your every thought is being broadcast, and you can't really stop it or do anything about it. Ridley's character named Viola, she crashes on the planet and is discovered by Todd, and the two then have to go on the run from a crazed preacher played by David Oyelowo, who for whatever reason, the first time I saw him, I was like, who is that? And then I realized it was David Oyelowo, like halfway through the movie, and I was like, oh, that's okay. And then the mayor of the town that Todd lives in is played by Mads Mikkelsen. So this is a pretty good cast, and for whatever reason, this movie is just terrible. The problem with the movie is it felt like it was trying to put in as much material from the book, even though the material didn't fit the need of the story that it was trying to tell. And I assume the idea was that it was going to put all these things in there just so, they can flesh it out more in future sequels, which I highly doubt are happening. Holland and Ridley have okay chemistry together, but the movie just trudges along. There's really it just kind of trudges along. There's not, the action sequences are okay. They're not really, groundbreaking or anything. It's not that great of a movie. The next movie, I do consider this a disappointment, but it's also probably my least liked movie of the year as well. Resident Evil: Welcome to Raccoon City. I was very, and I mean very, I never allow myself to do this, but I do it every now and then, and thankfully sometimes it works. It failed me this time. I was very cautiously optimistic for Resident Evil: Welcome to Raccoon City, considering who was involved. Johannes Roberts, who directed the surprisingly decent 47 Meters Down and The Strangers Pray at Night. And the cast was pretty good. I pretty much knew who everyone in the cast was, and I was really looking forward to seeing them play the characters. And I know a lot of people were like, "Oh, they don't look like the characters at all," but that's whatever. That's fine with me. I don't care. And then it took a while for the movie to come out, and then it finally came out, and I was still very cautiously optimistic, even though that the trailer came out, and for whatever reason, the song choice they used in the trailer was like, "What are you doing? Why?" But Welcome to Raccoon City had a good idea. It's set in the 90s. It's based on the first 2 video games. I think they even brought in some tidbits from Code Veronica in the movie, and they put the focus more on the horror than the action. At least that was what they promised. However, what we ended up with was a very slow-paced, sometimes boring, and I don't like saying that about movies, but sometimes boring new adaptation of Resident Evil. The movie mainly focuses on Claire, played by Kaya Scodelario from Crawl and the Maze Runner movies, who returns home to Raccoon City. Here it's a small town that's completely been taken over by the Umbrella Corporation, kind of on the eve of everyone leaving, pretty much. Claire gets information that something is happening to the town and goes there to warn her brother Chris, played by Robbie Amell, who's a police officer. The other focus is on the other police officers that are left in Raccoon City. We have Chris, we have Jill Valentine, played by Hannah John Kamen, Albert Wesker, played by Tom Hopper, Rookie, Leon Kennedy, played by Evan Jovia, the Chief, played by Donald Lowe, and others who respond to the incident at the Spencer Mansion. So we do have the Spencer Mansion in the movie. Honestly, I was really hoping that at least this movie would be decent. That was my only hope for the movie, that it would at least be decent. And it didn't have to be good, it just had to be decent. And what I ended up with was a movie with no real fleshed out characters, or characters that literally added nothing to the movie or the story overall. Like, why is that character there? Why is that character? Why did that character do that? That's so dumb. There's one point where it's supposed to be a character that knows everything that's happening and then lets something happen to him, which is so stupid. The horror of the movie was very subpar. It was barely scary at all. And the action sequences were pretty weak to tame. It made the action in the Resident Evil movies, in the Paul W.S. Anderson movies, look like masterpieces. That's how bad it is. There are moments that should feel strong and should have a bigger impact, but instead they feel just rushed, and they're like, no, we got to keep the movie going. You don't have time to, feel what you're feeling right now. Like, Claire finds out the thing that she's there for, and then it's like, no, we got to go do this first. And like, we have to go do this, Claire. Sorry, you can't. No. It was so bad. It was probably my most disappointing movie of the year, because I allowed myself to be optimistic for this movie, and this is what happens when I allow myself to be optimistic. Okay, moving on. Let's move on to the surprises of the year. Let's move on to something that surprised me. That was actually very good, or at the very least better than I thought it would be. First one is 8-Bit Christmas. I didn't really know anything too much about 8-Bit Christmas. I didn't even watch the trailer when it first came out. I just knew that it was out, and I knew kind of what the movie was about. So nostalgia can be a very good or bad thing, depending, especially in movies, especially considering, what they're about, and especially when you make it the backbone of your movie. And 8-Bit Christmas is just that. Although I wasn't actually born or grew up in the 80s, my siblings did, and I kind of have lived through the 80s through them, and so anytime 80s stuff pops up or, is mentioned or anything like that, I can usually follow along and appreciate it on another level. So, and then, you add in some Nintendo, and you got me. The movie starts off with Neil Patrick Harris as a father who's spending time with his daughter around Christmas, and all she wants for Christmas is her own phone. And, when they go to his childhood home, and she's, still trying to, ask for it, and he wants her to stop asking, he tells her the story of how when he was a kid, all he wanted for Christmas was a Nintendo. And then we get flashbacks, and pretty much that's where the movie picks up, those flashback sequences of him as a kid, kind of around her age, I think, as well. And we meet his friends, we meet his bully, and we meet his parents, played by Steve Zahn and June Diane Raphael, which are very good characters. Nostalgia aside, 8-Bit Christmas is a great coming-of-age story with a really good young cast that carry the movie and the material and the antics that you can only get away with kids in the 80s. It was really good. Also, secretly, a very touching story that throws out of nowhere emotional bomb at you at the end, but I was not ready for. And when it happened, I was like, why are you doing this to me? Why are you doing this to us? That's not cool. We just sat through laughing this whole time. Like, why are you doing that? That's not cool, man. Why are you doing this? So that in itself put it on my list for surprising movies of the year, because I just was not expecting that, and it worked. It really did. The next surprise of the year is America, the motion picture. It's an anime movie on Netflix. I'm just gonna come out and flatly say that America, the motion picture, it was one of the most ridiculous movies that I've seen this year as well. If it's a surprise of the year and I made a ridiculous category, America the Motion Picture will go on that category, because it is ridiculous. It's an animated movie. It follows George Washington, who was voiced by Channing Tatum, who, after the murder of his best friend, Abraham Lincoln, if you know your history, you know that can be possible, rallies up a crew of Samuel Adams, who's a drinking bro, Paul Revere and his trusty steed, the reluctant Geronimo, and the witch, quote unquote, Thomas Edison, who was voiced by Olivia Munn, because yes, Thomas Edison is a woman in this movie, to take down King James and his right-hand man, Benedict Arnold, from taking over the colonies. If that doesn't prove my point on how ridiculous this movie is, and if you watch the trailer as well, then really, I mean, come on. It's and the movie's fun. Take away historical accuracies for a second. You know what this movie is as soon as you hear the synopsis for that. It's just fun. It's a good chunk of it where the jokes really work. Obviously, you need to, again, suspend your disbelief of history to enjoy the movie, but I was not expecting it to be as funny and laugh as much as I did when I watched it. So it does have some pacing problems, but for the most part, it's pretty good. My last surprise of the year, Tom and Jerry. I probably, like many of you, grew up watching the old Tom and Jerry cartoons. Of course, when I was a kid, I was watching reruns times what have you. But still, overall, the story of the show was rather simple. Tom's a cat, hunts down Jerry the mouse, and shenanigans and physical cartoon bodily harm ensues. So it's a simple, straight to the point, right? Especially for a half hour or hour show, however long it was, with different stories and a revolving door of side characters. So, there have been Tom and Jerry movies in the past. I can't remember if there's been, live action, kind of CGI hybrid movies of the characters. So I'll go out on the limb and say this is probably the first one that has done that. And honestly, the movie, it's pretty fun. It's a kids movie. It's a family movie. It's a kids movie. I wasn't expecting it to be the greatest thing ever. And it's not the greatest thing ever. It really isn't, but it's still a lot of fun. Story wise, Tom and Jerry have left the suburbs and they go to New York City, not knowing that each of them are there until, a chance meeting at Central Park. And then eventually Jerry moves into this very high scale hotel, and Chloe Grace Moretz's character, who is one of the human characters, she plays a character named Kayla, who tricks the high scale hotel into hiring her off, false pretenses. And she hires Tom to get Jerry, and all this is taking place while the biggest wedding in the world is being planned to take place at the hotel. And of course, yes, shenanigans and cartoon physically body harm ensue. The whole, hot live action CGI hybrid movies, they usually don't really work for me most of the time, mainly because, kind of the uncanny valley aspect of it all. Some of them really work. Some of them, are very seamless and stuff like that. But when it's, very apparent that it's a cartoon and not, just like the CGI creation, it kind of just takes me out a little bit. But overall, I mean, it's a Tom and Jerry movie. It's fun. It's a mixed bag of like the human story is like a mixed bag. Michael Pena's in there. He plays Terrence. He plays a character who's probably the highlight of the supporting cast as a manager of the hotel who doesn't fully trust Kayla. And, he's Michael Pena kind of, doing a voice and stuff like that. So it's Michael Pena at all. So is it a perfect movie? No, it's not. But, I wasn't expecting at the beginning of the year to be like, Tom and Jerry's going to be good. It's going to go on one of my lists at the end of the year. And here it is. It's in my surprises. So, all right. So those are my surprises. We're going to stop and we're going to move on to my honorable mentions. All right. So the first honorable mention we have here on the list is Black Widow. Marvel finally got around to making that much wanted Black Widow movie. Unfortunately, it happened after the death of her character in Endgame. And in universe-wise, it happens in between the events of Captain America Civil War and Avengers Infinity War. But then we get that very last post-credit scene that jumps to sometime after the events of Endgame. Again, not bashing. I love the MCU and just making sure that everyone gets the timeline. That, of course, led to Hawkeye. Yes, while the movie itself is a bit late, the overall experience of Black Widow still holds pretty strong. I think this was the last movie review that I did a while back ago. Anyway, I did the Spider-Man No Way Home review not too long ago, a few weeks ago. Maybe it was just because we'll never see Scarlett Johansson play the character again, or maybe it was because this movie was hyped up more because of the pandemic, that we just wanted to see the new MCU movie coming out, because this was the first MCU movie after the pandemic. Either way, Black Widow was kind of fun. And at the very least, it was a decent movie, also decent solo outing for Johansson for the character, because we've never seen her by herself. She's always been in a group. The action was pretty spot on. Even the finale CGI battle in the sky. It was a contained story that didn't really need to fit into the wider scope of the MCU. It had a great supporting cast, of course, with standout Florence Pugh as Yelena, David Harbour as the Red Guardian, and Rachel Weisz as Melina, even though Weisz didn't really have too much screen time and wasn't given a lot of stuff to do compared to the other characters. We got that great opening scenes, rather, I should say, that was set in the past with the escape, and then the opening montage with the cover of Smells Like Teen Spirit playing over the fake home videos and the videos of the Red Room and everything else. A haunting way to start off a Marvel movie, not what I expected at all, and that's immediately stood out, making it a standout for the rest of the movie, and showing you like, hey, we can do different movies. It's not just all these loud comic book movies. I really don't have too many things to say against Black Widow personally. I think the movie could have used a little bit of a punching up, which I talked about in my review. Villain wise, I know a lot of people had things to say rather about Taskmaster, who was a fan favorite in the comics and one of the people that were looking forward to seeing in the movie. But I think what they did with the character and the story they were trying to tell in Black Widow, it made sense for the changes they made to the character. So, but yeah, Black Widow, not too bad. That's why it's here. My next honorable mention is Dune. Look, you either really like Dune or you didn't. And I think that's kind of where the line falls. I don't think there was a lot of in between for the epic adaptation of the movie directed by Denis Villeneuve, who ended up only being an adaptation of the first half of the book. Like any other Villeneuve movie, visually and the cinematography of Dune is beautiful to look at. And I do feel like any other... and it does kind of feel rather like another character in the movie. Villeneuve and cinematographer Greg Fisher, who has done cinematography for Snow White and the Huntsman, Zero Dark 30. He also did the cinematography for the Mandalorian series on Disney Plus, and he's doing the cinematography for the Batman coming up. Made Despair and freaking Sand. He made Sand look beautiful and gorgeous and everything else like that. I know a lot of people are saying, that besides the visuals, everything else in the movie it wasn't great. Like the characters weren't great and stuff like that. And I kind of agree with that, but I don't know. It was a mixed bag, but I liked it. I ended up liking it. So, my next honorable mention, Encanto, which I think I've, mentioned. I think probably on the Twitter. I don't think I mentioned on the podcast. I think I mentioned on the Twitter. I was not really looking forward to Encanto at all. It didn't really win me over. And then the last trailer they released really won me over. And then I watched it when it came out on Disney Plus after I was released from my isolation prison. And it was good. I liked it. I thought visually it looked great. The colors of the movie just popped every time they were on there. The story it was trying to tell, the themes of the movie were really good, and I know a lot of people had a lot of things to say about the movie. So I'm trying to put this in a way that doesn't offend anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about. So if you ask any Hispanic or Latino person, what they thought about Encanto, like the real theme of it all, they will tell you that they either felt personally offended, personally attacked, or saw with someone that didn't get that part of the movie. And everyone who knows what I'm talking about knows what I'm talking about. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, go ahead and ask one of your Hispanic or Latino friends. But I really liked Encanto. I really did. The story was great. The visuals were great. The songs were pretty spot on too. So I really liked it, especially for a movie that I didn't have any expectation for whatsoever. Next on the honorable mention list, the Fear Street trilogy, all of them, 1994, 1978, and 1666. One of the biggest, and not the biggest, Netflix ambitious release schedule and a gamble really was for the Fear Street trilogy. This was originally set to come out in theaters, and they were going to follow the similar format. They were going to release a movie at the beginning of the year. They were going to release the next movie, months afterwards, and then release the next movie, months after that as well. So Netflix kind of took that approach, but they were like, no, we're not going to wait months. No, we're going to release it back to back to back every week. So that was really cool. Of course, this is, again, based off the R.L. Stein book series, and he had Fear Street, and of course he had Goosebumps as well. So they really made this feel like an event. They really put their eggs in a basket with this, and thankfully it worked. I was pretty excited from the start for this project when it was announced, because I hadn't read a lot of Fear Street. I don't think I've read I probably read like one or two, but I knew what the series was. I knew that it was kind of the more adult take on horror than Goosebumps was. So when it was announced, especially how the movies were going to be announced, like everyone was like, why is it going backwards? Why are they doing that? That's dumb. Why are they going to do that? Like, I know, like, I saw a few people have been like, no, I'm going to watch them in order. I'm going to watch 1666 first, and then 78, and then 1994. We were dumb for thinking that, because obviously they knew what they were doing. So the order of the movie makes sense. The main storyline takes place in 1994, and then 1978 acts kind of like as a bridge for certain characters from the first movie, giving us context for the others. And then 1666 goes back in time to how everything started and does something really fun and interesting to finish out the whole story overall. The core characters are really great. Mainly our leads in Kiana Madera, I don't know, that's how to pronounce the last name. She plays Dina. She steadies the trilogy, which is saying a lot considering what the script and the story have her doing. Sadie Sink keeps the story going in the middle entry as Ziggy. Of course, she very familiar with Netflix and preteen stories with Stranger Things and stuff like that. Ryan Simpkins as Alice in that middle part as well does a really great job. And the period change in 1666 never really feels jarring, as the past two movies really prepares us for it. So it's not like all of a sudden this big time jump is gonna make you feel like odd or indifferent. Like, no, it makes sense for what they're trying to tell. Of course, for being a horror movie, there are some pretty cool kills and gore. I think 1994 probably has the coolest kill in the trilogy, and I think one of the coolest kills I've seen in a horror movie lately, and one that I didn't see coming at all. The killer characters are very interesting, but I think with the exception of only a few of them, most of them are just kind of there for show and to look at and to look creepy. I would have loved to get to know some of those more characters or get some explanation from those characters. We just don't get them. And while I really like the trilogy for what they were also able to do, the trilogy isn't without its faults. The constant needle drops in 1994 kind of took me out of it. 1978 kind of runs into a very slight and minor pacing problem where for the movie and kind of it feels like it kind of stops and then it revs up again. And 1666 is tasked with putting everything together and trying to tying it all up, and for the most part it does. But again, it just kind of goes back to the killer characters they're just kind of thrown in at the last minute for creep factor and tension. And while we're at it, if you haven't watched them yet, I will say skip the outros, because the outros for Netflix for the ending, once one movie ends, like coming up on the next chapter, skip that, because it spoils a lot. For whatever reason, we were watching, my brother and I we watched all three of them, the same day, because we waited until all of them were released. But we watched it, and then the segment came up, and then we realized that the outro and the segment for what's coming up for 1978, it really spoiled the movie. We were like, that spoiled a lot. And then we had to stop ourselves from watching the next one because we're like, we don't want to get spoiled. So yeah, but the biggest kudos goes to director Leigh Janick, who was able to pull all this off with a tremendously short filming schedule and a cast that was willing to go for it and keep the gore and kills as practical as possible, which is always a nice touch in horror films. And I, for one, can't wait to see what Janick does next, whether it's something completely new or another set of Fear Street movies, which she says she's down to do. Seriously, if you're not even the biggest horror movie fan, Fear Street, I feel like it's a good gateway into the horror genre for fans and non-fans alike. So give it a shot if you haven't. It's 3 movies. They're not that long. They're really great. Go give them a shot. All right, next on the list is Ghostbusters Afterlife. The Ghostbusters franchise has always been a very touchy subject when it comes to studios, obviously Sony in particular, wanting to continue the legacy. It could be because the first 2 movies are so beloved by fans and they don't want anything to taint it. Personally, I've never really felt that strong of a connection to the movies because despite knowing that they existed and the song and everything, I actually didn't see the movies in its entirety until I was very much older than I was, or older than, probably a lot of people watch them. So a lot of fans were upset by the last Ghostbusters outing, which, had the gender swap and Chris Hemsworth continuing to add his comedic chops. And while I enjoyed that movie for what it was, and looked past the gender swap, unlike many other fans did, at the end of the day, it was just okay. It was just an okay movie, even with the Ghostbusters brand behind it. Enter Jason Reitman, the son of Ivan Reitman, who of course directed the first 2 movies. And while Jason was adamant about never really touching any of his father's movies, especially Ghostbusters, along came a story that Jason just couldn't really pass up. And the movie went into development, and fans were cautious with another Ghostbusters movie, as they should be, but some were calmed down by the fact that it was being done at the very least, by Jason Reitman, so at least he couldn't do anything to ruin his father's previous work. Plus, it was a departure for Jason Reitman, who usually focuses a lot more on dramas to modest budget movies, as opposed to the big budget studio blockbusters like this was going to be. The result, Ghostbusters Afterlife, is a sequel to Ivan Reitman's movies. It's not a reboot. It's also a family drama with themes of legacy, which is very fitting. The movie follows the grandchildren of Egon, played always by the always reliable and slowly taking over Hollywood McKenna Grace, and Stranger Things is Finn Wolfhard, along with their mother, played by Carrie Coon in the movie. They moved to the middle of nowhere where Egon passed away and left them a rundown farm. With no money, though, the family decides to stay there for the summer. Grace's character, McKenna Grace's character Phoebe, starts to find his work, and she meets a new friend named Podcast, and their teacher, played by Paul Rudd, and they slowly discover why he was there and what he was really, up to and what he was doing. And Afterlife, filled with Easter eggs that some people felt sometimes were very heavy-handed. I didn't really see it that way. Again, it could be just because, I wasn't, deeply connected to the franchise like other people, but I think it did help bridge the gap between the old fans and the new fans. And while also not trying to ruin the story, it's trying to tell, because sometimes Easter eggs or nostalgia or, references, we talked a little bit about nostalgia earlier, that can ruin the movie for what you're trying to do. And more importantly, Afterlife is a lot of fun and it's funny. And while it does, and it doesn't get bogged down a lot, and it gets a little bogged down at some point, but not too much to the point that it kind of ruins or hinders the experience. And obviously there is the overly obvious product placement of Walmart and the very divided marshmallow the marshmallow store scene that everyone seems to be either okay with or not okay with. But overall, I think Afterlife accomplished what it set out to do. And if you didn't tear up or at least bawl like a baby at the end of that movie, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you gotta go get your stuff checked. So there you go. All right. Moving on to the next honorable mention, Godzilla vs. Kong. Look, it finally happened. 2 of the biggest kaijus in cinema history duke it out, and more than once. It just wasn't one fight. It was a bunch of fights. I didn't think anyone really expected this to happen until it was announced by Warner Brothers that they would be combining their Godzilla movies and Kong Skull Island. But either way, once it finally actually did happen, I'm sure fans like myself were very eagerly excited to see these 2 battle it out. I know Godzilla, the first movie, the reboot anyway, that happened, left many fans divided. I personally thought it was very good. I thought Kong Skull Island was also very good, probably better than Godzilla and probably better even than the sequel. But I think it's probably the best of overall of the 4 movies that we have already. But I really liked Godzilla versus Kong. I don't know, honestly, I thought it was a tough adventure for anyone who stepped behind the camera. but I think Adam Wingard, the director, stepped up and gave us, in my opinion, a pretty good modern day take and approach of these two facing off. And granted, it stumbled a bit. There's some. It's not a perfect movie. It's not, anything close to it being a perfect movie. But when it comes down to the knockout dragouts that Godzilla and Kong have, it's worth the price of admission alone. I'm very lucky that I got to see this on a big screen. So I'm maybe that, changed my opinion. However, with all the goodness, like I mentioned, there was a lot of missteps. The villains in the movie weren't very fleshed out at all. I felt like they were just kind of there and they didn't really do anything. They didn't really feel like they were real half the time. I felt like they were just rushing sometimes through the scenes just to get to, another massive point of the story, or just to get to more Godzilla and Kong. The returning characters of Millie Bobby Brown and Kyle Chandler really don't serve that big of a purpose, really, when you think about it. They're kind of just there, especially Kyle Chandler, who just probably showed up for a couple days and got a nice paycheck at the end of the day. But the best part of the human story was Gia, played by Kaylee Hotley, who is actually in real life a deaf actress. So that was pretty cool, and we were seeing a lot more of the deaf community being represented in Hollywood, which is very, very cool. But her connection to Kong, having her be the kind of adopted daughter to Rebecca Hall's character in the movie, I thought that was a nice touch. I thought that was really cool. So, and again, at the end of the day, the big battles with Godzilla versus Kong, just, it was awesome. It really was. I don't know. Is there missteps? Yes, there's obviously missteps, but just seeing those two fight it out on the big screen was very much worth it. The next honorable mention is Jungle Cruise. Disney, loves turning now their amusement park rides into movies. And of course, Jungle Cruise was the latest one. It's a pretty simple ride, really. I remember I have vague memories of riding it when I was very young, when I went to go do it before they, eventually closed it down. And now they brought it back because of the movie. It's a simple ride to go down river with some animatronics and statues of animals and stuff like that. And you listen to the cringe-worthy jokes by the captain that, they carried over to the movie. And here, they upped the stakes. You got Dwayne Johnson playing the captain, who takes Emily Blunt's character and her brother, played by Jack White, take them down the river to search for a mysterious and mythical fable tree that can grant people eternal life. And of course, not the only ones after it. Jesse Plemons plays a character who's, very comedic and stuff like that. So, and you got the supernatural aspect of it all. So it was good. I wasn't heavily sold on Jungle Cruise at first, despite being a fan of Johnson and Blunt. But the later trailers really helped me get excited for the movie, and finally watched it. I had a lot of fun with it. It was a lot of fun. The chemistry between Johnson and Blunt is very, very good. It was just a lot of fun. It was definitely inspired by the African Queen, which they took a lot of inspiration, a touch of Romancing the Stone, and of course some, Pirates of the Caribbean, feel to it there. Overall, Jungle Cruise was just a ton of fun. I mean, I don't know what else to say other than it was a ton of fun. And if you, were, borderline on watching or not, I'd say give it a chance, because it was actually very good. The next honorable mention is Last Night in Soho. I know a lot of this, left a lot of people divided as well. And I get it, I mean, I understand it. A lot of people had a lot of stuff to say about the execution of, the whole mystery aspect of the third act of the movie. And I get it. I understand it. And yeah, I probably could have used a little bit more work, but I think at the end of the day, I'm just a huge fan of Edgar Wright, so maybe maybe I'm a little biased. I don't know. You also have the great performances by Thomasin McKenzie, who is making a name for herself in Hollywood after Jojo Rabbit, and she was in another movie that I highly recommend that you guys watch if you want to see something else that she was in, called Leave No Trace. That's very good as well. That's the first thing that I saw her, and I think that's the first people most people probably saw her for the first time in Jojo Rabbit, but if you're one of the few people who probably saw Leave No Trace, and you saw her in it, that's kind of her first kind of breakout role. And now she's in this, and of course you got, the always now reliable Anya Taylor-Joy in there. And you got like the time travel aspect of it all, the great scene when the first dream sequence, when Thomasin McKenzie's character Eloise goes in, and there's those those great camera tricks that Wright was able to do. Apparently they did that as practically as possible, which I thought was really cool. Obviously they, had CG, into it, but they did do a lot of it practically, which I thought was really cool when I read it. So yeah, I mean, it was good. Yes, was execution. Yeah, it was. It probably could have used a little bit more work, but I think at the end of the day, I still really, really enjoyed it. My next honorable mention is Malignant. I think anybody who saw this movie had a lot of things to say, and it's directed by James Wan. I think he also co-wrote it as well. Honestly, the modern day master of horror for a long time, with Conjuring and Insidious, and he just, he was great. And then he came back and, he took a little break. He went to do his action thing. He did Furious 7. He did Aquaman. He's doing Aquaman 2. But he came back to horror with this. And he said that it was inspired by the Jalil films. It was also inspired by Dario Argento. And you got that. You got that a lot with Malignant. And it reunites him with Annabelle Wallis, who was in Annabelle, which I always find funny. She plays Madison, a woman who recently has gotten horrible nightmares about grisly murders that feel very real, and her horrors are amplified when she wakes up and realizes the murders actually happened. And even worse, she might be connected to them in some unseen way. This movie is just, I already swore on the podcast already, it's fucking bonkers. Okay, like I don't know how else to describe it other than it's fucking bonkers. And Juan literally said, I'm not holding back anything. So buckle up and enjoy the ride because it's going to get crazy. And if for whatever reason you've avoided the movie and the spoilers, first I applaud you because I watched this like the week after it came out, and I didn't get anything spoiled for me. I got an out of context shot of the movie and I was like, what the hell is that? And then I saw the movie and was like, oh, okay. Yeah. I'm glad that wasn't entirely spoiled for me. So if you've avoided it and haven't read anything, don't read anything. Just go in. The less you know about the movie, the better. The more you can enjoy the reveal of what that was. And the fact that they were able to keep that reveal and that twist from getting out is just, that is a feat unto itself. So yeah, that's I don't know what else to say other than go watch it. It is a slow burn. It does take a while to really pick up, and once it does, that final act is so crazy. That's just it's bonkers, man. It really is. Next on the list is Mortal Kombat. If you're my age, you probably grew up loving watching the original movie. And you probably played the video games also at one point, but seeing the characters on the big screen or TV or whatever is something else. And, we got tortured with the god-awful sequel, Annihilation. So when word got out that there was going to be a remake, that it was in the works, and that it was going to be produced by James Wan, and that it was going to be rated R, I think it was fair to say that everyone was excited to see what they were going to do. I know I was. And then the cast started getting announced, and pictures started coming out, and the trailer dropped, and it just made everyone freak out and hyped that they were making a proper Mortal Kombat movie. I didn't even care if the movie was a mess or if it was just going to be decent. I know that I was at least going to have fun with this movie, and I saw it, and I had fun with it from beginning to end. Is it perfect? No, it's not. It is not. It is still. There's a lot of, stuff with it, let's talk about the big elephant in the room. The movie is really a prequel. It's not really a Mortal Kombat movie because there is no tournament. There's a lot of talk about a tournament, but there is no tournament in the movie. It really sets up the tournament for future movies. Hopefully there is one, because I'm very much, I would totally be down to watch a sequel to this. And then of course there's the lead in the movie, played by Louis Tan, Cole. He's kind of our surrogate into this mythical world, which I know a lot of people didn't like that the movie created a new character, especially if a surrogate into the world, it could have been someone else from the games, like Johnny Cage, who we do get a tease for him in the sequel. But that said, Louis Tan, did the best he did with best he could with the situation, and his character is trying to prove himself that he could, that he is a chosen one and everything else like that with all these other characters. So, is he a weak link? I mean, story-wise, yes, because he's not from the games. And, obviously, fans are very protective and very ownery over properties that they very much care about. But, you know, I was fine with it. The rest of the cast is pretty good. Of course, everyone loved Josh Lawson's Kano, as they should have, because Lawson just chewed up all the scenery he was in. And despite knowing where his character ended up going, it was nice to see him with the heroes for a little bit, even though, you know, he ends up becoming the character that, you know, we all know he'd become. Joe Talzum as Bihan Sub-Zero was freaking scary, dude. Like, anytime he showed up, I think you were just genuinely afraid for anyone, because they were probably not going to walk away alive or unscathed whatsoever. And of course, one of the standouts, another standout besides Josh Lawson's character, at least for me, was Kung Lao, played by Max Huang. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. Who honestly could have just been another nothing character, but you know, Kung Lao is, you know, a kind of a popular character from the video games. I know I love playing as Kung Lao in the video games. And he has probably one of the best scenes in the whole movie, and the best fatality scene in the whole movie. And yeah, I couldn't help myself when I watched it in theater. Thankfully, we rented out theater, so I didn't embarrass myself in front of, you know, strangers. But I would have loved to see that in a theater with fans, because I just would love to hear their reaction to it when that happened. Because when that happened, I audibly just gasped in the theater. So yeah, there you go. And then of course, let's talk about the big man himself, Scorpion, played here by Hiroyuki Sanada, one of my favorites, actors and character wise as well. Sanada's casting really hit big for me, because I love Sanada, like I just mentioned, and the brief period we saw him as the human character of Hanzo Hasashi was very bittersweet. However, this was something I knew fans were upset about, was that we didn't really see Scorpion that much. Scorpion didn't really show up really until the final act of the movie, to the very end really. And part of me was like, you know what, that's actually kind of cool. You don't want to oversaturate the character. You know, what makes Scorpion so special is that he's, you know, he obviously is a fan favorite character, but if he was in the whole movie, would that scene have been, you know, as special as it was? So I don't know, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, you know, we want to see more Scorpion. So hopefully in the sequels, we'll probably maybe see a little bit more Scorpion. Hopefully, if they bring it back. I don't see why they wouldn't bring him back, but you never know. But that final fight that he has with Sub-Zero, which we saw a little bit in the trailers and stuff, that was really the selling point of the movie, because, you know, obviously that's what fans want to see. I thought that was really cool. The build-up was cool, the entrance was cool, the fight was cool. I really liked it. Again, Mortal Kombat isn't perfect, but I sure had a lot of fun with it. So, I mean, that at the end of the day, that's what's important. Let's talk about the next movie, No Time to Die. The Daniel Craig James Bond era is over. The 25th Bond film, No Time to Die, brings a solid run of Craig Bond to an end, and the results are fairly mixed, really, when you think about it. No Time to Die picks up sometime after the events of the last movie, Spectre, and we see Bond and Madeline, played by, of course, Léa Seydoux, escaping it all, living finally for themselves, and of course, you know, that happiness is cut short, and we have a new threat played by Rami Malek with ties to Madeline's past. No Time to Die has a lot, and I mean a lot, going on. This movie is almost 3 hours long, for crying out loud. And while you really don't feel the length once, you know, the action starts, No Time to Die has a lot of loose ends that it has to tie up before, you know, the reboot potentially of the series, or, you know, however they end up continuing after this movie. Although it'd be really hard to continue after this movie considering the ending. Although, so even though I found myself trying to find out where No Time to Die lands amongst the Craig movies, exactly, you know, exact listing wise anyway, it's definitely not on the bottom, but it's also, I don't think it's necessarily my favorite one so far. I think Skyfall or Casino Royale are probably my top two, and those will probably switch every now and then, but this one's probably like right there, and this is probably the number 3 maybe. So besides Craig and Seydoux, who already have a handle on their characters, Ben Wanshaw, Q returns, and he's as charming as ever, although every time I hear his voice, all I hear is Paddington now, because he does the voice for Paddington, so that was a little weird. Anna de Armas's character, which, you know, everyone, you know, really loves, Paloma, that scene in Cuba, it was a standout action sequence, and, you know, obviously a lot of people want her to come back. She came in and she did what she had to do, she was great, and she left. So, you know, if they never bring back her character, I think, you know, what we saw was enough. Of course, there was the new 007 agent played by Lashana Lynch, She's very calculating and mission driven, and she's a great addition to the movie, even though I wish we saw a little bit more about her, maybe even kind of like a standalone sequence, just to, make her own character and not necessarily, she's the new 00. We want to see what she does when she's by herself and not when she's with, Craig's Bond's character. So I kind of wish maybe we had seen that. So, and again, I don't know, if she comes back or if they rebooted or what have you, but there you go. Malik as the villain. Every good Bond movie has a great villain, and unfortunately Malik does do the best he can with what he's given from his character, whose name is Lucifer Safin, which, yes, sounds a lot like Lucifer Satan. He's not the best villain, even in the Craig era, to end with, and the whole concept of his plan sounds terrifying, and it really is if you sit down and think about it. But I don't know, I think it felt a little too far left, a little too out there for the series of Bond movies that always kind of seem to be grounded for the most part. So I don't know, it's just it is what it is. Overall, I did enjoy No Time to Die. I did really like it despite some of its missteps. It's just I think it's a little too long for its own good, and the ending, which has a lot of people still talking, is I felt for what they were trying to say here, I guess it worked. I guess it made sense, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, you kind of put yourself into a corner now with the next Bond movie if you decide to bring these characters back, or if you're just going to go full sail and make a brand new reboot. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens with that. But yeah, all right. The last honorable mention that we're going to be talking about here is The Green Knight. And yes, A24 is back on the list. The Green Knight immediately went to my must-watch list when the trailer came out, because that trailer was really good. Green Knight has medieval times. It's an Arthurian legend. It's old English speak, amazing looking cinematography, and a badass looking Green Knight himself. I mean, what more could you want? And then the movie came out, and The Green Knight was all of that, with Dave Patel giving an always reliable performance like he always does, and things that weren't even in the trailer. And then the credits rolled, and I just sat there wondering, what the hell did I just watch? In a good way, of course. Green Knight is filled with just tremendous imagery and themes and ideas that I'm sure, everyone, I haven't done too much research, but I'm sure, there's been a lot of articles about The Green Knight. And, from the production design is amazing, along with the design, again, of the Green Knight, played by the awesome Ralph Ensign, who from The Witch, his voice is immediately, recognizable. This is, kind of everyone's dream of a movie, I guess, if you're a production designer and stuff like that. But is the movie too slow for its own good? Maybe. The movie does rely on its, art house style over substance approach a little bit, maybe too much. But that said, when it comes down to the acting and everything, Dave Patel does a great job. Alicia Vikander pulls double duty here. She plays two characters. Joe Edgerton shows up as a mysterious character, which, if you've read, the legend of the Green Knight, you probably kind of know his connection a little bit, but maybe not, because the movie isn't necessarily fully clear with who the Green Knight is and stuff like that. So, is it a little too art housey for me personally? Maybe, but there's no doubt that the Green Knight is, hands down, visually one of the best looking movies of the year. No doubt about it. So there you go. Other notable movies I just want to point out, I think I mentioned Ryan the Last Night earlier. The French Dispatch was the new Wes Anderson movie. Not my favorite, but I still want to put it out there because it is, it is Wes Anderson, and some of the stuff that happened in the movie was pretty good. Eternals, I still will mention Eternals. I know Eternals has a very mixed audience and bag and stuff like that. So there is that. No Man Land, which came out very earlier this year, technically a last year movie, but didn't get a wide release until this year, and that's when I watched it. So there is that. One Shot, which was an action movie that I watched that was shot in one continuous take. That was pretty good. And then of course, One Night in Miami, very, very good, solid performances by the leads of the movie. So there you go. All right, that's the honorable mentions. Let us move on to my favorite movies of the year. All right, so my first favorite movie of the year, we have Belfast. I had zero intention to watch Belfast. I'm not gonna lie to you. I had zero intention to watch Belfast, like, at all. I didn't even know it was coming out until a couple months before it was released. And then I heard some pretty good things about the movie and stuff like that. So I was like, you know what? Why not? Let's go watch it. It was playing surprisingly at my local theater, which I didn't think it would. And we went in the middle of the week, and it was just me and my brother, and we had the theater to ourselves. We didn't rent out the theater. Just no one was there to watch it because it wasn't a movie that we expect to play in our theater, in our local theater. So we went and we watched it, and we had a great time. It was good. It was written and directed by Kenneth Branagh, and the movie is actually based off Branagh's own life in the time growing up in Ireland at that time. This is when the Christianity and Protestant divide happened in Ireland, and it follows Buddy, who was played by a newcomer, and making his feature film debut, Jude Hill, who was living again during the divide of Catholicism and Protestants at the time, and his parents, played by Jamie Dornan and Katrina Balfe, constantly bickering about money and when Dorian's character is going to come back to his job in London, and his grandparents, played wonderfully by Ciarán Hinds and Judi Dench, they just give him glimmers of hope and life advice, and I just really liked it. I'm happy that I went to go watch a movie that I had no expectations about, and then just ended up being blown away from start to finish. This movie is surprisingly very funny, and Hill is so open-minded about the world, and he loves movies and TV, and at one point he is reading a Thor comic, which I thought was very funny. Hines and Dench are so great as the grandparents in the movie, and I wish that we have gotten a little bit more time with them. Belle's character, I think I'm pronouncing her last name wrong, but she's from like the TV series Outlander. I think that's where most people will probably know her from. She, playing the single mom to these boys. There's just two of them. It's just, you can feel it. She's just so good at it. And Dornan comes in and he has his moments in the movie. He's not around too much, so you can't really get a good grasp of who he is, but you get the feeling that he is at least trying to be a good father and try to provide for his family. And he does have this nice kind of music. It's not really a musical number, but they do sing in it, and he's very, very good. So I really liked Belfast. It's a nice coming of age story. It's a period story. It gives us even the tiniest look of what it was like living back in that day and in Branagh's life. So do yourself a favor if you can find it, and once it comes out on video on demand. I don't think it's out on video on demand just yet, but if you can watch Belfast, do yourself a favor and watch it. It's very, very good. It is in black and white. The beginning of the movie starts off in color because it's showing you the present day Belfast, and then it switches over to black and white when it's telling its stories. But it's very, very good. Moving on to my next actually favorite movie of the year, Free Guy. It feels like the movie shouldn't have worked or been as much fun as it was, but it was. Directed by Sean Levy and of course Ryan Reynolds and Jodie Comer. It's a fun action adventure comedy that is funny. It's charming, and at the end of the day, it has a lot of heart, and that's what's important. And Reynolds plays, Guy, a bank teller whose dreams of something more in his life. Unbeknownst to him, he's actually a malfunctioning NPC character in a video game, and one of the most violent, ruthless, open world video games that's around. And he eventually meets Millie's character, who is played by Comer, who has entered the game for her own reasons and tries to take down the game from the inside, while also trying to tell him that he is not a real person. He's just a person from a video game. So the majority of it does fall on Reynolds, who is obviously more than capable of doing so, and is one of the things that I liked about Free Guy. He doesn't try to make it. Also doesn't try to make the non-video game audience feel dumb or left behind. Like probably, anybody else making this movie probably would have. It gives you everything you need to know without dumbing it down. And if you obviously you would appreciate it a little bit more if you knew about video games, or you knew about streaming. There's some streamers that pop into the movie as well. So the main thing here is that makes Free Guy so good, in my opinion, is that it's just having fun. It's not beating you over the head. It's clearly tells you and you can clearly tell that everyone, I'm all over the place. You can clearly tell that everyone is having fun and was just along for the ride. And that's what's most important. So overall, I don't really have anything negative to say about Free Guy. I really enjoyed myself. I genuinely laughed out loud at a lot of the jokes and the cameos that are in this movie. The cameos are great in this movie. They really, really are. So, give Free Guy a chance if you haven't watched it yet. Next favorite movie on the list, Judas and the Black Messiah. This one immediately jumped to my must-watch list as well when I saw that first trailer, because that first trailer was really, really great. And, obviously it tells the story of Fred Hampton, played here by Daniel Kaluuya, who does an amazing job playing, Fred Hampton, who was, of course, the famed Black Panther leader. And you have Lakeith Stanfield in here playing William O'Neill, who is essentially blackmailed and hired by the FBI to go in and kind of spy on them, spy on the Black Panther Party, spy on Fred Hampton's, chapter, and, give information to the FBI and stuff like that. So Judas and the Black Messiah it was a whirlwind of a movie. When the tensions rise in the movie, it stays there and it grips you on so tightly, never letting go until it wants to. And Kaluuya is so damn good in here, and there's a reason why he was able to win an award, because he's just so good and he commands every time he's on screen. He commands it, and you just are mesmerized by him, and he does such a great job of that. And you can only imagine that was what that was what people felt like when they were watching Fred Hampton, because people have said that Fred Hampton was an awesome speaker, and you see that in the movie, and you see that with Kaluuya, and the comparison and the parallels to that is really great. And whenever he's not on screen, you can say it hurts the movie, but then you have Stanfield to bounce off of, and he's there to pick up the slack in the movie, and he's really great. And a lot of the time, he's not necessarily always with Daniel Kaluuya's character, so it's really good. But another highlight of the movie is that we shouldn't forget about is Dominique Fishback. She plays Deborah Johnson, the eventual wife and mother to Fred Hampton's children. And Fishback holds her own. She holds her own. She has a great scene with Kaluuya where she recites a poem that apparently was a real poem that the real Deborah Johnson wrote and read at some point. And she has that other great scene near the end of the movie, which, I think anybody who knows Fred Hampton's story knows, that he was pretty much, killed by the FBI, and sparks the revolution that, he talked about so much. You have that great scene. It's a horrifying scene, but she plays it so well, and you can, it's just, I don't know what else to say other than, it's a terrifying scene. It's a horrifying scene, and the fact that it really did happen, but she, the way that she kind of, reenacts that scene it's powerful enough. And the story of Fred Hampton and everyone involved in it is truly remarkable. And the fact that I forgot and that I realized that the movie takes liberties with Hampton's age, because Hampton was actually a lot younger than the movie plays it out. Like, the movie plays it out like they're like in their 30s or, late 20s or something. Like, no, they were kids. They were teenagers when this happened. So when you take that into account, and you take into account everything that Fred Hampton did, which this movie, obviously tries to, recreate and stuff, that's amazing that he was able to do that at that young of an age. So Judas and the Black Messiah itself as a movie, it's a bit of a slow burn. There's some moments that, that they're a little slow, but it's always building up these characters and building up tension and rising it. And then, it's a movie that, keeps you going. The performance and the story just keep it going from beginning to end. So that's what I really like about it. So yeah, Judas and the Black Messiah, very, very good. Next movie on the list, Nobody. Seeing older veteran actors taking, these highly stylized action roles recently, it's pretty damn cool, and we can probably thank Liam Neeson for that. This time we have Bob Odenkirk in Nobody, which is a lot of fun. He plays Hutch. He's a family man who wakes up every morning and does the same thing over and over again. And then just one day, someone breaks into his house, and, he goes searching because, they stole his daughter's watch, and he ends up doing something that he probably shouldn't have done because he was kind of laying low for a long time, and he gets in the crosshairs of a mob boss, and he has to fight his way out, as everyone does when that happens. But nobody could easily fit in the world of like John Wick, and everyone was making that comparison, which is fair because the writer of John Wick was the writer of Nobody, so it makes sense. But I don't know what else to say about Nobody, other than I had a lot of fun watching it. This is probably one of the only movies that I've actually watched multiple times this year because it's just really good. It's got solid action in it. Odenkirk is fantastic in it, and I want a sequel. I mean that's all I really have to say. I just want a sequel, and that's enough. The next movie is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Marvel is back to their origin stories, giving us an origin for one of their oldest heroes. Shang-Chi's been around in the comics for a long time. So gone on the problematic issues, and in return, we get a good story with awesome action sequences, probably the best action sequences, at least hand-to-hand combat for sure, and a bright future for the MCU. Simu Liu plays Shang-Chi after years of hiding from his father, played by Tony Leung in the movie, having his own life. He's been tracked down and has to return home for mysterious reasons. And joining Shang-Chi is Katie, played by Aquafina in here. She's great. She's always great in everything she does. So that's really cool. And then you have a sister, played by, I'm not going to pronounce her name because I will get it wrong. But she's in there. She has her own issues with Shang-Chi and her father as well. So I don't think really anybody knew what to expect from Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. The subtitle, obviously made a lot of fans happy from the MCU because it was going to bring back the Ten Rings, which haven't been, mentioned or involved since Iron Man, and we finally have the real Mandarin here, played by Tony Leung, who in the movie is named Wen Wu, but he makes that subtle thing when they're having dinner that chick reference that he's been called many things since in this whole time that he's been alive. So it does make mention of the Mandarin situation of Iron Man 3 and the short All Hail the King, which Ben Kingsley is back as Trevor Slattery, which is really, really cool. I know some fans were like, we don't really need that, but I think, they did have to mention it. So bringing it back was a nice surprise. But I don't really have too many, negative things to say about Shang-Chi, other than it does probably lose some steam near the end before, the big final act of the movie. I think, eventually it does become, the big CGI final battle that everyone, talks about and stuff like that, and everyone always brings up in Marvel movies. I think they underused the Death Dealer character. That was really kind of disappointing because he just had a really cool design. But I do think that Shang-Chi Legend of the Ten Rings is probably a top tier Marvel cinematic universe movies, or movie rather. So yeah, I mean, I don't really have too many negative things to say. I had a lot of fun with Shang-Chi and Legend of the Ten Rings. So yeah, I can't really say anything negative about that. So moving on from one Marvel movie to another, my next on the list, just because that's how it works out alphabetically, Spider-Man No Way Home. I did a podcast about Spider-Man No Way Home, my reaction to it. I don't know what else I can add other than it's still really, really great, and the fact that they were able to pull this off is something else. That's it. That's all I'm going to say about that. So let's move on to the next two. We only have two left. We have the next one is, again, just the way how it works out alphabetically, The Mitchells versus the Machines. And this movie was another movie that I wasn't really invested in. I didn't really know if I was going to be interested in watching it, and then I saw it because we were all at home and we were like, what, let's just watch it. And this ended up being, I think if I really had to look down at everything, I think this is probably my favorite movie of the year. It's definitely one of my favorite animated movies of the year, for sure, hands down. But maybe overall one of my favorite movies of the year too. The Mitchells vs. Machines. It's on Netflix if you want to watch it. It follows Katie, who is voiced by Abby Jacobson, who gets accepted into a prestigious film school far from home, which is what she wanted. Her father, voiced by Danny McBride, who doesn't completely understand her movies and secretly not ready to let her go and grow up and move away, packs up the whole family of himself. Katie, their mom, voiced by Maya Rudolph. Their younger brother, voiced by one of the directors of the movie, Michael Rianda, and their dog to take Katie to the school, which is so it's a uninvited, unplanned road trip across the country to drop her off, which Katie does not want. Unfortunately for them, an AI named Pal, voiced by Olivia Colman, comes to life and decides that humans aren't worth it anymore, and the robot uprising has begun, and now the Mitchells, with all their bickering and all, might be their only hope, or might be humanity's only hope to save the world. So, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I loved The Mitchells versus the Machines. I told you, this might be my favorite animated movie of the year. It might be my favorite movie of the year overall if I really think about it. I had so much fun watching this. I laughed way harder than I thought I would. The jokes land perfectly. It's absurdly wild and more funnier than it needed to be. There's a mall sequence in this movie that is just, it had no reason being as funny and as fun as it should have, and it was. And the message of the movie is great. It's a great night in for the family, or if you just want to watch a great animated movie. I can't, say anything else other than positive things about the Mitchells versus the Machines. Honestly, I love it. I really did. All right, and the last movie on my favorite movies of the year, again, just this is how it worked out. I probably should have just switched it because I was going to talk about it. The Suicide Squad. Look, I was not a fan of the Suicide Squad, the first one. There were some things that worked, like Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, and, granted, she went on and, did Birds of Prey, and it was the first live action Harley Quinn that we've gotten, so there was that. Will Smith as Deadshot was pretty cool too, but I think the majority, the reason why we disliked the first Suicide Squad is, all those reports of studio interference, which, look, it's technically their movie. They are allowed, but sometimes, and I stress this very much, sometimes it might be best just to let the director you hire do their job. But there you go. Anyway, jump forward in time. We got Warner Brothers giving another go at the Suicide Squad, and this time with a much brighter color palette, a new director in James Gunn, and a slew of new characters that, let's face it, we all knew were going to die at some point. But more importantly, again, a new director in James Gunn. And Gunn brought in a much welcome new chaotic energy to the project, so much that while the movie does bring back some characters like Harley and Viola Davis's Amanda Waller, Joe Kinnaman's Rick Flag, and Jai Courtney's Captain Boomerang, the movie felt like a brand new thing. And if you held out, you really don't need to watch the first movie because this movie kind of treats it as its own thing. You probably would appreciate, the characters that they return, but at the same time, you really don't need to watch that, first movie. But Gunn goes full balls to the wall with the Suicide Squad, with the action, the gore, the jokes that run aplenty. The action here is really what surprised me because clearly his time in the MCU has allowed Gunn to really handle big budget action set pieces. The humor is spot on. It doesn't always work, but for the humor that does, it really works, and the characters feel real. We get to the core. When we get to the core characters, we're going to follow them through the movie, and you really do care for them and you feel for them, and it really sucks when they're injured or when you think they're about to die. Daniela Manquire's, I can say you pronounce her last name. If I'm not, I apologize. Ratcatcher 2 is really the heart and soul of the movie, and her somewhat father-daughter relationship with Idris Elba's Bloodsport, which is really cool, works in the movie as well. John Cena's Peacemaker is obviously, a standout for a different reason. Obviously, he's getting his, TV series that comes out later this month. Overall, of course, the fan favorite is probably David Dastmalchian's Polka Dot Man, who is the butt of a lot of jokes, but he gets his moments and gets his moments to shine that really, really work in the movie as well. The Suicide Squad does fall into some pitfalls of being a big movie, so we have, to add some stuff to fill out the movie, but while it doesn't always work for the most part, the Suicide Squad is a massive improvement from the last outing, and also had it's a ton of fun, and it's really enjoyable in its in its entirety. So I really like the Suicide Squad. You can say it's an improvement from the last movie because it is, but as a standalone movie by itself, if that other movie didn't exist, I think this was also very, very good, and probably is one of the best movies of the year. as well. But if looking at the whole list, I would have to say that probably the Mitchells versus Machines. If I really had to pick one, I think the Mitchells versus Machines is probably my favorite movie of the year. I'm not gonna lie. Yes, Spider-Man in there as well, but at the end of the day, I think I liked Mitchells versus Machines. That's it. That is my list. That's it. Finally, probably you're probably thinking like, thank God he's finally stopped talking. It was definitely another year of interesting movies that came out this year. So, but at the end of the day, whether my big ass list, what were some of your favorite movies? What were some of your enjoyable movies? At least frustrating surprises, what have you? Did you just give up on movies entirely again because of COVID? I know I almost did, but thankfully I didn't. Actually, that's not true. I was going to watch movies nonetheless. But nevertheless, here's to another great year, another awesome year of movies, hopefully. And a giant thank you to all of you who have listened to my nonsense of this recap of 2021, but also everyone who has listened to the podcast this last year. And hopefully you come back and continue to listen this year and for the whole year and stuff like that. I got things planned for this year. It might take a little bit for them to fully happen and go into effect because, of work and stuff like that. So, but hopefully when it does go into effect, you guys like it. Again, just thank you so much for listening, and thank you guys for everything, really. This podcast is going to go on its 6th year this year, which is mind-boggling to me because I did not think I'd be getting to 6 years. I didn't even think I'd be getting to 5 years, but 6 years coming up next month in February. So thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. I appreciate all of you. Hopefully you guys are had a good year and had good holidays and stuff like that. I know we're weeks out, but still, this is my first podcast of the year. I still gotta tell you guys that. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you guys next week when we bring back the podcast for the weekly roundup of news and everything else like that. So, yeah, make sure to check out all the links down below. Be good people. And as always, considering this is a recap, go continue watching some movies.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.